On the Buzzbeater this Sunday, CBS suspends Lara Logan, even though the network isn't using that word, for the botch report in Benghazi, and admits that 60 Minutes should have vetted the story far more carefully.
The most important thing to every person at 60 Minutes is the truth. And the truth is, we made a mistake.
MSNBC drops Alec Baldwin over an alleged anti-gay slur shouted at a photographer. And he attacks gay advocates and demands to know why his network didn't penalize Martin Bashir for sliming Sarah Palin. So you have this versus this versus this.
On Thursday night, when we discovered the account he gave the FBI was different than what he told us, we realized we had been misled, and it was a mistake to include him in our report.
Get away from my wife and the baby with the camera. What life would you want that in? What life would you want it in?
I wanted to take this opportunity to say sorry to Mrs. Palin and to also offer an unreserved apology to her friends and family.
We'll examine how the networks handle these very different screw-ups and how that affects their credibility. A magazine says Michelle Obama is a feminist nightmare because the First Lady is avoiding political battles and spending time with her kids. Where does Politico get off anyway? Katie Couric becoming a global anchor for Yahoo. Can a website really compete with TV news? Plus, a liberal commentator goes public in describing how she found Jesus and became a devout Christian, stunning her left-wing friends. A conversation with Kirsten Powers. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. It was as big as any mistake in the history of 60 Minutes, based on the bogus account of a security contractor who claimed to have been at the U.S. compound the night of the attack in Benghazi. CBS News Chairman Jeff Fager took some of the blame this week after an internal inquiry, saying that in his other role as executive producer of 60 Minutes, I pride myself in catching almost everything, but this deception got through, and it shouldn't have. Fager also put his star correspondent, Lara Logan, and her producer on what's being politely termed a leave of absence for an indefinite period of time. On the same day as MSNBC canceled his new show, Alec Baldwin denied using an anti-gay slur, only some choice curse words, with a photographer outside his apartment. And the actor let loose in an interview with The Gothamist, attacking TMZ and what he called the fundamentalist wing of gay advocacy, naming blogger Andrew Sullivan and the organization GLAAD. So was the punishment warranted in these starkly different cases? Joining us now, Lauren Ashburn, Fox News contributor and author of the top Twitter Talk column on FoxNews.com. Jim Pinkerton, Fox News contributor and contributing editor at American Conservative Magazine. And Dana Milbank, columnist for The Washington Post. Given the magnitude of the mistake on this Benghazi story, was CBS justified in suspending Lara Logan?
Absolutely. This was a colossal mistake, and something had to be done. That isn't to take away from Lara Logan and Max McClellan, who are very good journalists. But this is true in any corporation. When something goes wrong, you have to apologize and take action in order to maintain your credibility.
I'm told this suspension is going to be for a significant period of time, not just a couple of weeks, which some might see as a slap on the wrist. But, Jim, would someone without the track record and the star power of Lara Logan have been fired over this story?
Well, it's possible, but there's an old joke in journalism, too good to check. And I think, look, if you make millions a year reading scripts on the air, you're obligated to ask questions about where it came from. But I must admit, it's also strange that Jeff Fager, if he's overall in charge of the show, the executive producer, why doesn't he suspend himself, as well as Logan and McClellan?
That's a serious suggestion?
Why not? I mean, if accountability means accountability, then the people who make the mistakes are accountable. Which leads into my question for Dana, which is the language in this internal inquiry report is very measured. It's sort of a just the facts approach. Wouldn't it have been better for CBS's credibility, for Fager's credibility, to have an outside investigation?
Well, that might have helped, and I'm also a little puzzled by this sort of suspension penalty, which a lot of news outlets, including mine, have used sort of in between saying you're sorry and firing somebody. And it seems to me if they did something bad, well, they get fired. And if they didn't do something that bad, well, what's this suspension thing like? You're in the penalty box for a little while, you need a little cooling off period. I'm not sure exactly what that achieves. And I think CBS...
Well, isn't it a question of you're paying a significant penalty for making a very bad mistake on an important story, but it's not one in which it's worth ending your career at the network.
I suppose that's the statement they're attempting to make here. I wonder why CBS dragged it out this way, and they basically revived the story themselves, where they'd already taken the hit for it, and now here we are on Media Buzz going at him again.
But I think that part of it, Dana, might be money. We don't know in this case whether or not suspension means no pay. But I think when that kind of thing happens, that's a hit to the pocketbook, maybe, and that gives the perception that there has been some sort of punishment.
To your point about wanting the story to be true, this internal report talks about CBS running a red flag in the person of contractor Dylan Davies, because he told Lara Logan before the story aired that he had lied to his own security company in saying that he wasn't at the compound in Benghazi. Then he told Lara Logan he was. He also told a different story to the FBI. It seems like their whole team wanted to believe this guy, who also had a book out published by a unit of CBS.
Exactly, which they didn't disclose.
Right.
I mean, they were so anxious to keep this together that they didn't even get into the fact that they had an obvious corporate synergy there, where somebody in another department within CBS Viacom was saying, hey, listen, we need this book to be a success now. It's got to be a bestseller to hit our numbers for the quarter.
How about... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Howie, that's the first thing that, as a journalist, brings a red flag to mind, is that if someone's trying to hawk a book, I want to be very sure that what they're saying to me is true, because they have another motive, which is to sell that book and make some money.
Right, and it's almost like being a lawyer. If your chief witness admits to you having lied once, obviously that raises credibility concerns. So what about Alec Baldwin? Now, he has denied using this particular anti-gay slur, and he has an incident of being harassed by the paparazzi, so I have a little sympathy there. But then he goes on this rant against the fundamentalist wing of gay advocacy. What's the message?
You don't have to like Alec Baldwin one bit to nonetheless agree that he's got a point when he says that Don Imus got fired for making derogatory comments about blacks, and he's getting fired about making derogatory comments about gays. But meanwhile, Martin Bashir makes derogatory comments about conservatives, and he gets an apology. Big deal. That's not even a penalty box. He's saying it as nothing. It would appear that MSNBC has built into their business model, look, it's fine to attack conservatives. That's kind of what we do for a living around here at MSNBC. But you attack blacks and gays, that's not acceptable, and you get fired.
But I think a lot of people, to Dana's point, who have been fired or suspended over something like this are crying foul. There was a tweet from David Schuster, who used to work for MSNBC, who says he used slang when interviewing Hillary Clinton, asking if they were going to be pimping out Chelsea Clinton. And he said, I don't understand what's happening here. Somebody must have pictures of Phil Griffin. That was his tweet.
Phil Griffin is the MSNBC president, and David Schuster, I guess, is still ticked off about that. But let's come back to the hiring of Alec Baldwin. I mean, he's an actor and a comedian, and MSNBC gives him a weekly show. Not unaware of the fact that he's had anger issues in the past.
Right.
And then do you act shocked that he gets into one of these street altercations?
I really think you can't even compare all these three things. The CBS thing is a real genuine journalistic miscarriage. The Alec Baldwin thing, I mean, he had barely been on the air at all, and he is some sort of a loose cannon. They probably thought differently of it very quickly after hiring him, whether he had done that or not. Then you have the Martin Bashir thing, which was really quite different. He was making a very legitimate point about Sarah Palin.
Let's back up for people who haven't been following every jot of this. Sarah Palin had given a speech in which she compared the national debt and owing money to China to slavery. A lot of people didn't like that. So obviously, and I've said this in the beginning, it is fair game to criticize Sarah Palin as a Fox News contributor over that. But let's not mince words here. I mean, what Bashir said in a scripted read with graphics that had to be approved or at least acquiesced in by other people at the network, suggested using her as a toilet.
Yes, and I think the legitimate point that he was making is that these slavery things are brought up too often, and this is how awful slavery is. Then he brought up a vulgar thing at the end for which he apologized. Yeah, that happens on MSNBC. It happens on Fox News. People on this network have talked about decapitating me and turning me into hummus. Nobody's getting suspended or barely even apologizing for that sort of thing.
Was that a host or a guest who wanted
that was a host in your 8 p.m. hour. This is the sort of thing that can happen on any network.
Right, but that's fair. If you say it's not that big a deal, fine. Then why did they fire Don Imus then?
Well, I mean, they're very different people at very different
said
times.
Awful, not even awful. They're nasty things about African American women at Rutgers, and they fired them. Said, no, that goes beyond the pale.
Why does Fox News fire Glenn Beck but not Bill O'Reilly? They're very different.
Well,
contexts.
first of all, Fox News didn't fire Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck left when his contract expires. I don't think either side necessarily wanted to continue. Just to be clear on that. But it was the reason we're bringing up Martin Bashir again. It's not that I like to talk about him every week. I mean, MSNBC's made clear it's not going to do anything. But it's because Alec Baldwin said, hey, how come I'm getting the boot and not this guy?
Right. Well, we don't know what Phil Griffin is thinking. We don't know why that's happened. Maybe there were other things behind the scenes that we don't know about. But what I do want to raise, which may be controversial, is that he at least apologized. I think that in our society, in our culture, people are very willing to throw bombs at other people, and no one is willing to say, hey, you know what? I went too far. I'm sorry. I'm not condoning what he's saying. I just think Lara Logan said she was sorry. In a personal relationship, when you offend someone, you say you're sorry, and the other person says you're forgiven. In TV news, it's a little different.
Just to give you the chronology, Alec Baldwin did apologize in a note that was posted on the MSNBC website.
But he retracted it.
Well, he kind of retracted it the next day, and now he went off on this thing about gay advocates.
The other obvious difference here is Martin Bashir is a journalist with a serious track record who's probably granted more leeway to make a mistake than somebody like Alec Baldwin, who is not a journalist at all and is known for popping off.
But let's just also add, look, Andrew Sullivan and GLAAD and the professional gay rights activist types made a point of demanding that Baldwin go. I mean, and it worked. I mean, the pressure campaigns against media figures work, and there was not a similar pressure campaign against Martin Bashir.
One other thing, in that report on 60 Minutes, the CBS executive said that Lara Logan had given a speech in which she talked about we need to do more against Al Qaeda, and said this was a conflict in terms of her continuing to report on this story. We'll be back in just a moment.